Welcome back to SciFi Humanity, where we delve into the far reaches of the galaxy and bring you the most captivating stories. Today, we're continuing the thrilling saga of the Black Ship. In Chapter 40, tensions run high as Wyatt Staples and the crew navigate complex decisions in the war room. Join us as we explore the intricate dynamics and high-stakes decisions that shape the fate of the Noir Navio and its crew. Without further ado, let's dive into The Black Ship, Chapter 40. Wyatt Staples glanced around the war room, every occupant silent as they waited for Commander Redford to stop. Reading from a data pad, they all sat around a round table with several seats. Left unoccupied, the officers present were those in charge of one of several divisions across the Noir Navio. Being the lone ship, no matter how advanced, meant that having more than one commander was entirely unnecessary, and only capable officers were sufficient to run the day-to-day activities. Tom was present as the senior officer representing both the communications division and the bridge deck crew. It had given him a small headache understanding how the red-haired man was simultaneously Commander Redford's most important and direct subordinate, and not necessary for most of the commander's activities. Still, protocol was protocol, and GT had to be present for their occasional meetings with the other head officers since they lacked Army and drop troop elements. The most veteran Marine captain had been selected for the role. The other three head officers present, also selected through similar processes, were in charge of overseeing the logistical, intelligence, and engineering divisions. At first he questioned why he had to be present for their reunions, since while he was an officer, he simply couldn't compare with the status, standing, and rank the other men and women present had, both in terms of military and nobility. But Redford had dispelled his doubts by simply stating that he was permitted to assist those meetings as his second in command. Again, technically speaking, it should be Clara who had to carry such duties, as she was the captain of the ship, but she delegated those concerns to her executive officer, Redford Callan. Despite the recruits from Woodshaft and a few selected personnel gained in Matcha for vital areas, they were still understaffed and undermanned. That was a problem that, if the Noir Navio were to be any other ship built in the Principality, would present a danger to not only the crew but its long-term operational capabilities. Luckily for all, the Noir Navio was frighteningly self-sufficient, with automated processes that kept it running at maximum efficiency. Even while understaffed, he glanced at the gray-haired man who had taken him under his tutelage. Much like a clique's all parent would teach its offspring how to hunt and scavenge for food, Wyatt found the man focused on the data pad and thought about how different this meeting was from the others. He never voiced an opinion, for none was needed before the head officers would come in exchange pleasantries, give a short, concise report that quickly grew repetitive with rare and minor alterations, and then be dismissed before the 5-minute mark. He had been barely able to exchange a few words with GT after each meeting before their duties forced them apart. The pilot had been frustrated by his inability to thank the man for his aid, but at least he had a gift almost ready to convey his gratitude properly. Be that as it may, something was different during this meeting. The head officers, he noticed, were tense, even if they tried to hide it. There was a measurable amount of displeasure marring their expressions. Though if I have to be honest, it's not hard to guess what's got them so visibly agitated. Wyatt reasoned a few seconds before the commander set his data pad down and his cybernetic eyes analyzed each of the 6 officers, filling a seat around the table. If you have something to say, then voice your concerns. You are not children waiting for my permission to speak, Redford said in the same tone a father would speak to a troublesome child. Taking the initiative, the older, tall and muscular Fabian Deshire, acting head officer of the Marine Division, was the first to speak. Commander, I believe I speak on behalf of all those who are present when I say that while we won't object against the order given by Her beloved Majesty Princess Clara, many have come to us in confidence to let their displeasure be known. My brother speaks truthfully, Commander. Even the commoners are outspoken against the idea of integrating reprehensible pirates into our ranks. Among them, I believe the Auxilia will not tolerate any pirate to join them, even if the princess herself orders them to hatred, resentment, and anger will ensure any of them be found dead shortly after their integration. Through unfortunate accidents, the logistical head officer warned before for sharing a glance with her brother. Wyatt frowned internally. He could smell their lying breath from across the table, but he had to admit that the Desert siblings Fabian and Seriton Desire were capable speakers and knew how to mask their real intentions behind a veil of truth. It was not a secret that after it was announced that some of the captured pirates would be pardoned and integrated into the Noir Navio personnel. Many had been outraged at Clara's decision. He too had been initially displeased and had every intention of asking the blonde woman what her purpose was. However, the more he thought about it and pushed aside his personal feelings, he hoped the potential glimpse of opportunity he was imagining was not a mere illusion set before him. The siblings, both very attractive, sharing cybernetic eyes and pale blonde hair, were using said outrage in their favor, but their claims were obvious lies, no matter how much the Zilia staff members, general crew members, and other commoner personnel barked and protested against a royal and asked her at that they would obey in the end, even if begrudgingly. No commoner would risk entering a royal and, more importantly, their hard-earned place in the military for a simple discontent. Judging by Redford's unmoving expression, the aged commander thought the same. Let the commoners be outspoken, and those that act against the order given by their princess shall be punished accordingly. Her command is immutable, and it shall be carried out without fail, Redford replied, and turned his attention to Lupin Lanto, head officer of the engineering division. His eyes were vibrant and red like scarlet marbles, while his brown hair adorned his trimmed head. Everything about the tall, lanky man screamed how superior he was compared to everyone else, starting with his immaculate uniform, sharp features, and the perfumed aroma that followed him everywhere. Has this malcontent reached your division, Lupin? Indeed it has, Commander, Lupin replied with a nasal but elegant voice, although I must add it has not been as pronounced as in other divisions. My personnel only care about performing their duties and nothing more. Boasted the prim and proper man. Sasa, Redford asked, turning to the woman with a purple hue that shone across the length of her long, otherwise black hair. Her grace synthetic eyes portrayed an edge of humor that did not bother to hide. The staff and the crew whine about it, but they know their place. It is the nobles who voice the largest protest, but will not move against an order given by Her Majesty, replied Saska, Kaspar's lieutenant, commodore and head officer of the logistical division, recommended by Vivan Travis herself. However, I must voice my concern over the fact that the pirates have split into 3 factions after their leaders delivered upon them the princess's deal. They are quarreling amongst each other and abroad is likely to spark at any given moment. Animals, all of them unable to contain their savage nature, and spit upon the mercy bestowed upon them by our beloved Princess. Lupin, technician and chief, added his tone, showing a measured disdain. Wyatt contained the urge to roll his eyes. Being a commoner, he was no stranger to the ancient art of showing submission, and as Wessel would put it, kissing ass. But even in that field the nobility showcased an entire different level of mastery that amused him. If Redford's barely noticeable eyebrow twitch was anything to go by, then the older man was experiencing annoyance at the display carried out by the lanky man. Be that as it may, Sasa has brought up a valid concern. We can't split them apart. That'll only dissuade those who may be redeemable from seeing the value in what Her Majesty is offering them and turn them back to their misguided, twisted ideals, Redford reasoned and crossed his arms before turning his gaze to Wyatt. Lieutenant Staples, you've been pensive this entire time. Do you have anything to add? Wyatt stiffened slightly at being suddenly thrust into the center of attention. What is Commander Redford planning? The pilot asked himself as he exchanged a short-lived glance with his commanding officer. Questioning his motives would solve nothing, so instead he thought about the dilemma at hand, slightly tilting his head as he pinched his chin. But the question was, what could he even add to the conversation? The problem to solve was the pirates themselves. The Auxilia and pretty much everyone else hated them. With justified passion, he saw them as criminals except for the babies, and the unmarked children. What could even be done about them, except for throwing them out to the void or handing them over to other authorities, so they could be dealt with? He also had no idea what Clara was trying to gain by showing her clemency, except for what he thought was a likely possibility he could be wrong about it. But he had nothing else to work with. If he had to give a proper answer, he first needed more information. He had made the rushed decision to destroy the freighter without a second doubt, and that could have spelled the doom of several innocents, no matter if they were pirates or not. He had made one crucial mistake that no pilot should ever make. He had not taken into account the circumstances around him and rushed ahead without a plan in mind. Filled with determination, he turned to Sasa. "What are these factions you mentioned?" Lady Sasa blinked, surprised. Before answering, "There are those that chastise their leaders as weaklings that surrendered to the principality and sold them out for their own gain. I wouldn't waste my time with them. Pirates through and through who believe themselves to be morally superior. Freedom fighters or some other delusion." She scoffed. "Most of the oldest and some of the most heavily indoctrinated young ones are in this group. The second faction is made up of the ones that want to take the deal. The third and largest faction is largely undecided and is the only thing keeping a semblance of peace when our guards aren't looking." Wyatt hummed deeply. "Thank you, Lady Sasa," he replied politely and with a tinge of submission, slightly bowing his head. In the process, internally he wanted to kick himself for doing so, but he couldn't help it. During their occasional get-togethers, Clara had taken it upon herself to teach him tidbits about mannerisms that would be useful to him. Now that he was a noble, one she constantly touched upon was for him to avoid showing submission, fear, or blind obedience to other nobles just because they were nobles. So far, that had proven to be a monumental task. She was asking him to stop doing something he had been taught to do since he could first remember. Being deferential to nobles was part of the daily life of a commoner, and the consequences for not being so could be dire. It was an essential part of his education, and most times did so automatically. Being disrespectful or confrontational was not a wise move to make, and his diligence had spared him from many a punishment, and he could always complain and curse at the nobles, in his mind and in private. But now things were different, and he had to change fundamental things about himself in order to adapt to his new reality. Shaking those thoughts aside, he turned to the Dezzer siblings, Lord and Lady Dizzer. "How likely would it be for the pirates that accept the clemency offered by our princess to die at the hands of the auxilia, the marines, or belligerent crew members?" Fabian turned to his sister, his eyes glowing faintly for a few seconds before Seriton replied, "Lieutenant, are you insinuating that marines, proud members of noble houses, all would do something so dishonorable?" Wyatt stammered as he recoiled at the accusation, but as he felt an apology crawl up his throat, he swallowed it, and his posture turned solid. With his left hand, he gestured at her brother. "Lord, your brother has already made that insinuation." He paused, seeing Fabian glare at him, but nothing more than that. Then he continued, "The auxilia are the most outspoken. This is true, but no one is pleased with us housing pirates outside the brig. This includes the marines and myself, of course. Believe me when I say I would dispose of those bearing marks without hesitation." Seriton, he said, barely able to stop himself from adding a lady before her name. "I fail to see how this is relevant, Lieutenant," Fabian remarked curtly, ignoring the pale blonde man. Wyatt turned to Lupin. "Lupin, would it be possible to seal off the area in which the pirates are now?" Lupin hummed softly, his fingers dancing on the table as he drummed on it a few times before replying. "It would take time, but it could be done, Lieutenant Staples." Lupin replied, not too happy that he had to show someone of inferior rank a measure of respect, no matter the reason. "Lieutenant Wyatt, if I may ask, what are you thinking about?" G finally spoke up, confused yet intrigued. Meanwhile, Redford remained silent, waiting patiently. Turning to the red-haired man, Wyatt raised a finger. "We can't integrate the pirates that may accept the princess's offer, because that will cause unavoidable conflict at least." Not directly turning to Commander Redford, he noticed that the gray-haired man was now looking at him with interest. Emboldened by the lack of a rebuke, he pressed on. "What if we isolate them and put them through a program under the care of veteran officers charged with re-educating them and training them properly?" "Pardon, you must surely be jesting. Have you lost your mind?" "Madness. Utter madness." Sasa Lupin and the desert siblings exclaimed one after the other. GT was looking at him as if he had just vomited all over his uniform, while Redford leaned back on his chair deep in thought. "I assure you I am sound of mind." "I hope," Wyatt thought the last two words with some trepidation driven by courage. He was not feeling inside his heart. He continued. "Her Majesty Princess Clara wishes to spare as many of these wretched pirates as she can and draw them to her side. Pirates, these criminals, are anarchists and failed rebels. Criminal scum that deserve no pity or mercy, yet she has granted it to these lucky few, but many of them are young and innocent. It matters not, they're criminals, deserving of punishment," Fabian replied. "Princess Clara thinks otherwise," Wyatt countered, and Fabian flinched. "I know. What I'm suggesting is difficult to process, but what other alternative aside from doing nothing and letting chaos ensue do we have if we are to carry out Her Majesty's orders?" The room went silent for a few seconds, giving the pilot much-needed time to organize his thoughts. "How many pirates were captured?" In total, G cleared his throat. 34 babies, with 2 of them perishing, 107 children of various ages, and 258 adolescents. Of the children, 46 are unmarked. Wyatt nodded in thanks. "Giving them a standard education is impossible and impractical. Their entire worldview has been centered around survival and violence. The children could be saved, and maybe some adolescents, but those too ingrained in the ways of life of a pirate will never accept the princess's offer. But how do we get as many of them to question in their way of life simple appeal to their survival instincts and their selfishness? Many are doubtful thanks to the rations, clean water and fresh clothes given to them, are they not?" he asked, turning his gaze to Sasa. "You are correct, Lieutenant. There are doubtful among their numbers," the purple-haired woman replied with a chuckle. "They devour standard commoner rations as if it was a meal prepared by a professional chef. It is laughable. Then we use that in our favor." Wyatt agreed. "We could simply force them into service as conscripts and be done with it. Since Her Majesty wants them, it would save the lives of some auxiliary forces during assaults, and that way cleans their crimes with their deaths," said the Desire woman, cold and distant but methodical. "If that's what the princess wanted, she would have done it from the start." "No, I believe she desires to convert as many of these pirates into something worthwhile as possible, but it must be their choice. I do not know why she could desire such a thing," Wyatt countered. And it was true. Clara had yet to tell him what her great plan was by pardoning as many of them as possible. Looking around the table, he saw that the head officers, GT included, were giving his words some credence, but it was enough. He needed something with more weight, and he knew exactly what to use in his favor. "I'm trying to shoot at a running click, all with a faulty rifle, while blindfolded in the middle of a storm. I hope I'm right about what Clara wants out of this," Wyatt thought before crossing his arms and humming deeply, regaining the attention of everyone. "Or perhaps we are not reading the princess's orders correctly." Lupin leaned forth, frowning. "Explain," he demanded. "Why would the princess want these pirates at all? I may be wrong in believing this, but doesn't this sound more like a test for us?" Wyatt asked, and suddenly the temperature in the room dropped by several degrees. Only Redford and GT remained mostly unfazed by his words. "Perhaps the princess wishes to see how we would solve such a problem and fulfill it to the best of our capabilities. Measure who is competent and who is replaceable." A few seconds of silence marked the end of his question, broken only after Seritan Desire made her voice known. "That could be factual," she agreed. trying to hide the shaky fear that rumbled in her throat. Your suggestion has merit if we take such a possibility. No matter how slim into consideration, some low-ranking Marines could be used as instructors. Fabian offered as some of my men could impart their skills into breaking apart their feeble indoctrination. Saraton added, following her brother's line of thinking. It would be bothersome, but I suppose that a section of the storage area they are currently using could be hastily isolated and adapted to act as the barracks for those filthy animals. I would, however, require authorization and the number of recruits that would need to be housed. Lupin added, securing the rest in the barg and the resources necessary won't be a problem. We have a surplus of everything as we are. Saska joined in. Before we jump into any decisions, tell me, Lieutenant Staples, why do you believe spending so much effort on mere pirates is sound more so when you are basing your decisions on assumptions? Redford's voice cut through like a plasma cutter through a flimsy steel door. Forgive me for being so bold, Commander, but I simply cannot think of any other possible reason as to why Her Majesty would want to keep these pirates not only alive but seek to integrate those that can be given a chance to serve the Principality. Wyatt replied, pausing for a moment to swallow a ball of nerves that had formed inside his throat. Most of all, aren't they useful? Useful? Redford questioned, raising an eyebrow. At best, those that accept and are then trained to be semi-reliable combatants could develop a sense of belonging or see what being a pirate really means. At worst, they could be shoved to join the mercenaries and be of use in some capacity. Who knows, perhaps there could be one or two among them who can surprise us and show skills in other fields like technology, logistical support, or even as pilots. A far-fetched possibility, but one that holds merit. Redford agreed tentatively. It is true that conflict is inevitable, so minimizing the damage should be among our top priorities. However, these redeemed pirates could never be fully trusted to join the auxilia. They would become their own unit, one under the purview of the princess or one of her closest confidants. Now it was Wyatt's turn to feel a sudden chill run down his spine after hearing Redford's words. Does anyone have anything else to add? No one replied. If so, you are dismissed. Lieutenant Staples and sent room. You are to remain here, Redford commanded. The rest of the head officers were quick to leave the war room, leaving only 3 men inside it. Once alone, the commander rubbed his temples before letting out a long, hearty chuckle. Nicely done, Wyatt. You keep surprising me at every turn, both good and bad. What? Wyatt thought, confused. What is he talking about? Excuse me, Commander, but I fail to understand what I've done to receive your praise. Redford's lips curled into a soft, tiny smile before replying, you truly do not realize what you've done. Do you? I wouldn't be asking otherwise. Don't you think so, Commander? Wyatt thought, with mild annoyance, though his expression remained puzzled. Wyatt, are you certain you've never received proper training as an officer? GT asked, looking at him worriedly. Commoner, Wyatt replied, with a frown as he pointed at himself. My training has only come so far with the lessons Commander Redford has given me. I'm struggling to memorize the chain of command and learn the rules of engagement and etiquette among officers and superiors, he answered, and turned to the still smiling Redford. Commander, please, what have I done? Simply put, Wyatt, you've successfully done exactly what the princess wanted to achieve. Redford answered. He did. I did, Wyatt asked, at the same time slack-jawed. Quite so, Redford said, losing his smile. My head officers are good at what they do, but they are at the end of the day set on their ways, unimaginative, caring more about their status and quick solutions. Not the right ones. You aren't as stiff as the others, GT, but you can improve. Wyatt, you may lack the years of training spent at the academy and the honing through long, dull service that others have, but you hold an innate ability to think, solve puzzles, and search for alternatives. You demonstrated such talent shortly after we met when you deduced that the Third Fleet had joined Duke Draymore. GT's eyes widened slightly as he stared at the young pilot, while said pilot looked flabbergasted. Every achievement after that and your dismal learning rate on how an officer should be and act has led me to conclude that I cannot train you. As a conventional officer, you are a man of decisive action, but also one who can look into the smaller picture and extrapolate the bigger one whilst simultaneously thinking outside the box. I've come to detest this word as of late, but there is no other way to describe you as anything other than paradoxical. Now that I know how I can train you, expect our lessons to truly begin. Redford exclaimed with a glint in his eye that is all the honored commander. Wyatt replied, his mind reeling as he tried to process everything the older pilot was telling him. If I can serve Clara the Principality and perform my duty better, I shall do anything to make it possible, he proclaimed without measuring his words. Redford gave him a solid nod of approval. As you've correctly deduced, Clara wants to save as many of the pirates as possible and turn them into something worthwhile. The youngest children will be instructed and guided to discover any potential talents they may possess, but those over 12 shall be inducted into their own combat unit, mostly for support operations. Children and poorly trained teenagers make for terrible frontline soldiers and boarders. The gray-haired man hummed, letting out a long, tired but satisfied sigh by playing into their weaknesses and giving them a window of opportunity to believe they were acting on their own initiative. You've ensured that Her Majesty's objective has a higher chance of becoming a reality, he explained. At any rate, these redeemed criminals will be useful one way or another and enjoy the prospect of a better life. Then again, it is difficult to find anything worse than being a pirate who knows maybe they can be used as an example to other pirates in the future, that an alternative is possible for them: guaranteed meals, payment, medical treatment, and a sense of belonging. I wonder how many will stick to their anarchistic ideals when faced with such opportunities. G asked no one, then looked at Wyatt with a sense of admiration. You truly are a man of honor, mercy, and many surprises. Wyatt Staples, I can't tell them that I was just following a hunch, not after receiving their praises like that. No, I have to tell them. I won't lie to them, Wyatt thought, and just as he was about to speak out, a familiar voice called in his mind, Wyatt, come to my quarters. I need your help urgently. Whatever shame and sense of guilt he felt was gone in an instant as he stood up, startling the two men at the suddenness of his action. He saluted and stammered a quick, the princess summons me, before leaving as fast as his legs could take him. Redford crossed his arms and turned to G. Before you are dismissed, once the unit is formed, you'll be in charge of overseeing its development. Guy did a double take. Commander, certainly. There are those more qualified, there are. But the princess is in short supply of those she can trust. This shall be my own test to measure your gratitude and loyalty. G. Time work with the other head officers and ensure nothing goes awry. I shall give you further instructions at a later date. For now, you're dismissed. Redford commanded. G. stood up and gave the older man a salute, but didn't turn to leave just yet. Sir, if I may, can I ask why Lieutenant Wyatt is not the one chosen to perform this task? Even if he could handle more than what he already can, I would not consider him to be a prime candidate for such a position. Redford replied puzzlingly, dismissed, saluted once more, and then left the war room, leaving the agent commander alone with his. Thank you for joining us for Chapter 40 of The Black Ship. As the crew of the Noir Navio faces difficult choices and navigates internal strife, the stakes have never been higher. Stay tuned for the next chapter as we continue to uncover the mysteries and challenges that lie ahead. If you enjoyed this episode, please like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell to stay updated on our latest stories. See you next time on SciFi Humanity, where adventure awaits in every corner of the galaxy.